Great. What's your name?
Jamal Roberts.
Where you from?
Meridian, Mississippi.
What do
I love
you...
being in Nashville.
Just imagine, a young man walking in with nothing but an old guitar and a big dream, winning the judges' hearts instantly, fans falling in love, and the world buzzing with excitement. But what most people didn't know was the other side of Jamal's life. From struggles, personal secrets, to a tragedy that made the public cry, we're going to uncover it all right here. Before we dive in, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel so you won't miss more inspiring stories from around the world. As a reporter tracing the footsteps of Jamal Roberts, what stands out immediately is that his beginnings were not the kind of glamorous childhood often associated with rising stars, but rather the story of a boy raised in modest circumstances who carried dreams far larger than the environment he grew up in. Jamal was born into a family filled with love but limited in resources, far removed from the bright lights of show business. From an early age, hardship was a familiar companion. The family often lived from paycheck to paycheck, learning to stretch every dollar, and daily life was shaped more by sacrifice than by luxury. Yet within that reality lay something extraordinary: Jamal's voice. Even as a small child, he showed an uncanny gift for music, often standing in the tiny local church where his family worshipped and filling the air with notes so pure that people would stop whatever they were doing just to listen. Neighbors and congregants recall moments when Jamal's singing felt less like a child's performance and more like a message carried straight from his soul, a sound that somehow managed to soothe, inspire, and astonish all at once. What made it even more remarkable was that he never had formal vocal training, no expensive lessons or professional coaching. It was simply raw talent, sharpened by passion and persistence. Those around him quickly realized that this boy had something rare, something that might one day allow him to escape the limitations that weighed so heavily on his family. But Jamal was never just the boy with the golden voice, he was also the boy with the golden heart. Accounts from people who knew him growing up consistently describe him as humble, quick to smile, and willing to lend a hand to anyone who needed it. This blend of character and talent made him beloved in his community long before television audiences knew his name. As a journalist piecing together these early chapters, it becomes clear that Jamal's childhood was not merely a backdrop to his later fame, but the foundation that shaped the depth and authenticity of his artistry. Every note he would later sing on the grand stage of American Idol carried the weight of those early struggles, every performance infused with memories of hardship and love that gave his music its soul. Understanding Jamal's beginnings is essential, because it allows us to see how a boy from a modest home, armed with little more than faith and determination, could grow into a figure of hope for so many. And in a tragic twist, it is also from this very foundation of resilience and sacrifice that the heartbreaking events of his later life would take root, leaving us not only inspired but deeply saddened. In retracing the story of Jamal Roberts, one cannot overlook the pivotal role music played in his life from the very beginning, for it was never just a pastime or a distraction but rather a lifeline, a language, and a form of therapy that carried him through circumstances that might have broken someone else. From the accounts of family members and childhood friends, Jamal was the kind of child who could transform the mood of an entire room simply by picking up his guitar or humming a melody. He didn't grow up with access to high-end instruments or professional studios. Instead, he learned on what he had, an old guitar with strings that had seen better days, sometimes out of tune, but still capable of producing the music that would define his identity. He spent countless hours teaching himself chords, replaying gospel songs he had heard in church, and slowly building his own style. At first, it was just for himself, a way to process emotions he didn't yet have words for, but soon it became clear to those around him that his songs carried more than just melody, they carried honesty, vulnerability, and resilience. When his family was tired after long days of work, Jamal would sing to lift their spirits, and when his mother struggled with illness, he would sit beside her bed strumming gentle notes, offering comfort not through promises but through sound. Friends recall that even as a teenager he would scribble lyrics into worn notebooks, songs that spoke about hope, pain, love, and faith, reflections of the world he saw around him and the battles he was fighting within. For Jamal, music was the one place where limitations disappeared. There were no financial struggles in the notes he played, no grief in the harmonies he created, only freedom. As a reporter analyzing this stage of his life, it is striking how naturally music became both his shield and his sword. A shield that protected him from the harshness of reality and a sword that allowed him to carve out an identity bigger than his circumstances. Unlike many young performers who see music primarily as a path to fame, Jamal embraced it as a companion, something sacred and deeply personal. This connection gave his performances an authenticity that would later distinguish him on the national stage. Every note, Every lyric carried a piece of his truth, and that sincerity is what ultimately resonated so strongly with audiences. Looking back, it becomes evident that Jamal didn't just fall in love with music. He surrendered to it fully, allowing it to shape who he was and who he would become, setting the stage for both his triumphs and his tragedies. As a reporter documenting Jamal Roberts' remarkable path, I can say that his decision to audition for American Idol was the culmination of years of quiet preparation and relentless belief, not just in his own talent but in the dream that music could change the trajectory of his life. Unlike many contestants who arrive at auditions with flashy outfits, entourages of friends, or professional coaching behind them, Jamal came with nothing more than his weathered guitar, a few handwritten notes, and the kind of determination that cannot be staged. Those who were present recall that even before he sang a word, there was something compelling about his presence. Nervous but focused, modest yet unshakably hopeful. When his turn finally came, Jamal stepped into the audition room carrying the weight of his family's expectations and his mother's hopes along with him. He strummed the first chords and began to sing, and within moments the energy of the room shifted. The judges, seasoned veterans who had listened to thousands of hopefuls over the years, leaned forward in their seats. The crew members paused their work. There was a silence that only ever falls when something extraordinary is unfolding. His voice was rich, soulful, and tinged with a sincerity that cut through the air like a revelation. By the time he finished, the room erupted, not with polite applause but with genuine astonishment. The judges' feedback was glowing, some even visibly emotional, and it was immediately clear that Jamal was not just another contestant but a potential star. Within days, a clip of his audition made its way onto social media, where it spread like wildfire. Viewers from across the country and even internationally shared his performance, calling him a once-in-a-generation voice and expressing how deeply his singing moved them. For his family back home, it was a moment of indescribable pride. For Jamal, it was the validation of everything he had sacrificed and dreamed about since childhood. But as a journalist, what strikes me most about this chapter is the duality. While audiences saw the beginning of a fairy tale, Jamal himself saw it as the beginning of even greater responsibilities. The viral fame brought opportunity, but it also brought pressure, a spotlight that would magnify not only his brilliance but also the struggles he worked so hard to conceal. His journey to the American Idol audition was more than just a personal milestone. It was the moment when a boy with a dream stepped onto a stage that would embrace him, define him, and ultimately, in ways no one could have anticipated, break him. As I investigated Jamal Roberts' journey behind the glittering facade of American Idol, one recurring theme emerged from conversations with fellow contestants, staff members, and even fans who met him off stage: the smile. Jamal was almost always smiling, whether he had just completed a breathtaking performance or was waiting nervously backstage for results. To the public, that smile became part of his charm, a sign of confidence, warmth, and approachability that made viewers feel connected to him. Yet, as a reporter piecing together the fuller picture, I discovered that the smile often served a very different purpose. It was in many ways a mask. Beneath it, Jamal was fighting battles far heavier than anyone could imagine. His family's financial struggles did not vanish when the cameras started rolling. He was still sending portions of his modest stipend back home, still worrying about bills that piled up, and most importantly, still haunted by the knowledge that his mother's health was deteriorating. In quiet moments off camera, he would retreat to corners with his guitar, not to rehearse for the competition but to soothe himself, strumming soft melodies that revealed his exhaustion more than his ambition. Several contestants confided later that Jamal would often encourage them with words of support, even when he himself looked drained, choosing to lift others up rather than admit his own weariness. The producers, like most in the audience, saw only the performer, the radiant young man whose energy seemed boundless. But those who spent time with him could see the flicker of sadness in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. This duality, exuding joy in the spotlight while carrying pain in the shadows, is a story familiar to many artists, but in Jamal's case, it was especially poignant because of the stakes. He wasn't just chasing a dream for himself, he was carrying the hopes of his family, particularly his mother, who longed to see him succeed before her illness consumed her entirely. That pressure made him determined to never show weakness, to never let his audience or his loved ones see how close to breaking he sometimes felt. As a journalist observing this, it is both admirable and heartbreaking. Admirable because his strength allowed him to push forward despite immense hardship. Heartbreaking because his silence deprived him of the support he desperately needed. The smile that millions adored was real in its kindness, but it was also a shield, a fragile barrier hiding the storm inside him. And as his journey continued, that storm only grew stronger, threatening to consume the very light he projected so beautifully to the world. When covering Jamal Roberts' time on American Idol, it becomes impossible to separate his journey from the unforgettable moments he created on stage, the kind of performances that not only moved audiences in the moment but lingered in their hearts long after the show ended. One of the most iconic episodes came when Jamal chose to perform a deeply emotional ballad, a song that carried both technical difficulty and profound lyrical weight. As soon as he opened his mouth, the room shifted. There was a hush so complete that even the sound of cameras clicking seemed intrusive. His voice soared effortlessly across the octaves, but what made the performance unforgettable was not just vocal precision, it was the way each note seemed soaked in emotion, as though he were offering a piece of his soul to the world. The judges, often known for their tough critiques, were visibly shaken. Some had tears in their eyes, and one described the performance as a masterclass in vulnerability. For the audience in the studio, chills ran through the room, while millions at home flooded social media with messages of admiration, declaring that Jamal had just delivered a performance worthy of the Idol Hall of Fame. But that was not his only defining moment. Week after week, Jamal demonstrated remarkable versatility, from intimate acoustic renditions that showcased the raw warmth of his tone, to upbeat numbers where his charisma and stage presence drew raucous applause. Each performance added layers to his identity as an artist, proving he was not a one-note contestant but someone capable of telling different stories through music. Reporters like myself took note of the way audiences began to anticipate his performances above many others, with his name trending online after nearly every show. What made Jamal unique was his ability to blur the line between competition and confession. He wasn't just singing songs, he was narrating his life, his joys, and his sorrows. For his growing fan base, these moments became touchstones, reasons to believe in him not just as a contestant but as a future star. And yet, looking back now with the knowledge of the tragedy that followed, those performances take on an even deeper meaning. They were not simply acts of entertainment, they were cries of both triumph and pain, a reminder that when Jamal sang, he wasn't only competing, he was surviving. His iconic moments on American Idol remain etched in the collective memory of fans and journalists alike, immortalized not just as highlights of a season but as the defining expressions of a talent gone too soon. As a reporter following Jamal Roberts' journey on American Idol, there was one moment that marked a turning point in his story, a chapter that shifted the narrative from triumph to tragedy, the death of his mother in the midst of the competition. For those who had watched Jamal week after week, his performances seemed to carry an unusual weight, and soon it became clear why. Behind the radiant smile and soulful voice was a young man reeling from a devastating personal loss. His mother, who had been his greatest supporter, the person who had encouraged him to sing in church as a child and who sacrificed so much to keep his dream alive, passed away after a long illness while Jamal was still competing. News of her passing rippled quietly through the production team and fellow contestants before it reached the public, and everyone who worked alongside him noticed how profoundly it shook him. Yet in the face of heartbreak, Jamal made the decision to continue performing, choosing to honor her memory on stage rather than withdraw from the competition. When he returned to sing just days after her death, the atmosphere in the studio was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. The usual buzz of anticipation was replaced by a somber silence, as though the entire audience collectively understood the weight of what was about to happen. When Jamal sang, his voice trembled in places, but the emotion behind each word was undeniable, raw, pure, and heartbreaking. Judges who had heard thousands of performances over their careers were reduced to tears, unable to offer anything more than words of admiration for his bravery and vulnerability. Fans at home were equally moved, with social media erupting in tributes, calling it one of the most powerful moments in American Idol history. But beneath the awe and respect lay a deeper truth. Jamal was carrying a burden no young contestant should have to bear, pushing himself forward while privately grieving a loss that had shattered his world. As a journalist, I saw this as both an act of incredible strength and a warning sign, for while the performance proved his resilience, it also revealed the immense emotional toll he was under. This tragedy, occurring at the very height of his rise, became the defining moment of his journey, not just because of the beauty of his tribute but because it underscored the fragility of a young man trying to chase his dreams while simultaneously mourning the most important person in his life. It was a moment that would forever shape how Jamal was remembered, both as an artist and as a son. As I continued to report on Jamal Roberts' time in the spotlight, what became increasingly evident was that beneath the applause and praise, a silent storm was building inside him, a storm that audiences could sense but not fully understand. After the death of his mother, Jamal's performances grew even more poignant, but those close to him noticed subtle shifts that hinted at the toll the competition was taking. The once bright spark in his eyes began to dim, replaced by a heaviness he tried desperately to mask. His smile, still present for cameras, no longer carried the same effortless warmth. Instead, it seemed carefully constructed, as though he was trying to convince both himself and the world that he was all right. Contestants who shared the stage with him later recounted moments when Jamal would withdraw into himself between rehearsals, sitting quietly with his guitar, strumming the same melodies over and over as if trying to anchor his emotions through the strings. Crew members spoke of how he often appeared exhausted, not just physically but emotionally, as though each day in the competition required him to summon reserves of strength that were dwindling rapidly. And yet, when the lights came on, he delivered, pushing out performances that left audiences stunned, creating the illusion of resilience. What most viewers didn't realize was the crushing weight of expectation he was carrying. The hope of his late mother, the pride of his family, the adoration of fans who saw him as a symbol of perseverance, and the relentless pressure of competing on a national stage where every mistake could be magnified. Mental health professionals who later analyzed his case pointed out that such circumstances are fertile ground for burnout, grief, and depression, particularly for someone so young. But Jamal, true to his nature, kept his struggles to himself, refusing to burden others, determined to be a source of strength rather than a plea for help. As a reporter observing from the outside, it was heartbreaking to realize how invisible those battles were in the moment. Hidden behind bright lights and television edits that celebrated his talent but ignored his pain. The hidden mental pressure became the silent antagonist in Jamal's story, a force that eroded him quietly even as the world cheered him on, reminding us all of the unseen costs of chasing dreams in a system that prizes performance over well-being. In the days that followed Jamal Roberts' passing, the public response was unlike anything I had witnessed in recent memory, and as a reporter who has covered countless stories of celebrity deaths and fan reactions, I can say that this outpouring of grief felt different, raw, communal, and deeply personal. Fans who had cheered for Jamal during American Idol transformed their grief into tributes that spanned every platform available. On YouTube, videos of his most iconic performances were re-uploaded with emotional montages, often set to the very ballads that had once moved millions, and the comment sections quickly turned into virtual memorials, filled with messages of sorrow, gratitude, and remembrance. TikTok users created short clips highlighting his smile, his laughter, and his voice, while others sang covers of his songs as a way of keeping his spirit alive. Instagram and Twitter, usually buzzing with fleeting trends, were dominated by hashtags bearing his name, turning feeds into mosaics of farewell messages, personal reflections, and prayers. What struck me most was how fans, many of whom had never met Jamal, spoke of him as if he were a close friend. They described how his voice had been there for them during their darkest moments, how his courage in the face of personal tragedy inspired them to keep going, and how his authenticity made them feel less alone. Beyond the digital space, fans organized candlelight vigils in multiple cities, gathering in parks, church halls, and even outside American Idol studios to sing his songs together, voices trembling but united in tribute. Meanwhile, celebrities from across the entertainment world, including major recording artists and past Idol winners, expressed their condolences, underscoring how deeply Jamal's story resonated beyond the boundaries of the show. Some pledged to honor his legacy by advocating for greater mental health support in the music industry, recognizing that his story was not just about individual loss but also about systemic failure. For his fellow contestants, the reaction was overwhelming. They shared behind-the-scenes memories of Jamal's generosity, like the way he would encourage nervous performers or offer a shoulder to lean on during stressful rehearsals. All of these tributes combined to paint a picture of a young man whose impact far exceeded the stage. Someone whose life, though tragically short, created ripples of connection that will be felt for years to come. As a journalist observing it all, I was reminded that fame is not measured only in record sales or trophies, but in the number of lives touched, and by that measure, Jamal Roberts' legacy was already immeasurable. When reflecting on Jamal Roberts' story as a reporter, what becomes clear is that his legacy cannot be confined to a single season of American Idol or measured solely by the applause he received while alive. Instead, his impact stretches far beyond the boundaries of the stage, rooted in the authenticity of his journey and the sincerity of his voice. Even though Jamal's life ended tragically soon, his music continues to live on through recordings, viral clips, and the countless tributes fans have created. His songs, once performances in a competition, have now transformed into symbols of resilience, hope, and vulnerability, resonating with people who see in him a reflection of their own struggles and dreams. But his legacy goes deeper than the sound of his voice. It lies in the way he inspired others to face adversity with courage. Teachers have reported using his story as a lesson for students about perseverance. Choir directors have shared his performances as examples of singing with emotion rather than perfection. Mental health advocates have invoked his name in campaigns, arguing that his death underscores the urgent need for better support systems for young artists. Even within the idol community, Jamal is remembered not just as a contestant but as a friend whose generosity and humility left lasting impressions. Former judges have called his journey one of the most memorable in the history of the show, not because of how far he advanced in the competition but because of the emotional truth he brought to every song. For his family, his legacy is even more personal. He remains a beloved son and brother whose sacrifices and dreams continue to inspire them. And for fans around the world, Jamal is more than a memory. He is a reminder that greatness is not always defined by fame or longevity, but by the depth of impact one person can have in a short time. His everlasting legacy is proof that music, when born from honesty and lived experience, can outlive tragedy, turning pain into inspiration and loss into a story that binds people together. As I close this report on the life and loss of Jamal Roberts, I am struck by how his story embodies both the triumph and the tragedy of chasing a dream. He was a young man who came to American Idol with nothing but a voice and a dream, and in a matter of weeks he captured the hearts of millions. His performances were not just displays of talent, they were windows into a soul that carried both immense hope and immense pain. The tragedy of his passing reminds us of the fragility of life, of the hidden struggles that often lie beneath the surface of public success, and of the urgent need to support those who give so much of themselves for our admiration. But Jamal's life should not be remembered only for its sorrow. His courage, his authenticity, and his ability to touch others through music remain as powerful reminders that even in the face of adversity, beauty can be created and shared. For the world, Jamal Roberts leaves behind a legacy of inspiration that will continue to echo in every replayed performance, in every fan tribute, and in every heart that found comfort in his songs. And though his journey was cut heartbreakingly short, his voice, both literal and metaphorical, remains eternal. Thank you for watching. Find other interesting videos in our channel's playlist.